Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello Rank Squad and welcome to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. Looking back at Wednesday's action in the second leg of the quarterfinals, we have now all four of our semi-finalists. Two games today, an absolute barnstormer between Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, and a less barnstormer, shall we say, between Arsenal and Sporting. In many ways, it was a tale of two football matches. It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. I'm Jack Collins, and I will be your host today. And joining me across the water, it's the one and only Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Well, you definitely got the best game again, didn't you? Look, I picked it. I said I wanted to watch Arsenal, and I always do generally pick the English team because that's where my main interests always do lie. But yeah, I was regretting this halfway through the first half, I've got to admit.
You were regretting that after 35 seconds.
35 seconds, actually. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's start here in Munich. Let's start with this absolute crackerjack. It ended 4-3 to Bayern, but Real Madrid took the lead after just 35 seconds. Comical sort of error from Manuel Neuer, handing the equalising goal in the tie to Arda Güler after just half a minute, the quickest goal in the Champions League this season. It then swung, Dean, from pillar to post, back and forth. Pavlovic took advantage of an error at the other end from Andre Lunin to head home the equaliser. Then, about half an hour mark, there was a free kick awarded to Real Madrid, a very, very soft free kick, we should probably say. But there was nothing soft about the goal that followed. Arda Güler curling one in from all of about 25 yards. Absolute beauty, postage stamp. Although, again, questions on what on earth Manuel Neuer was doing by diving behind the line as opposed to on it. But take nothing away from the Güler free kick. It was back down the other end. Harry Kane scoring a lovely goal after some really nice work from Luis Diaz to put Bayern back ahead on the tie, equal on the night. And Kylian Mbappe forcing one home just before the break. So we went into the break at 3-2 and 4-4 on aggregate. And then a little bit like yesterday, you know, I spoke about the game between Atleti and Barcelona and I was absolutely stunned that there was no goals in the second half. I'm still stunned that it took another 44 minutes of the second half in this one for and the goals to be scored, should we say, that ended up sending Bayern through to those semi-finals, winning on the night and on aggregate. They both came from Luis Diaz and Michael Olise, and we'll talk about them individually after a red card for Eduardo Camavinga, who'd come on as a second half substitute and got 2 yellow cards in very quick succession. There were, post-game antics, shall we say, afterwards, some remonstrations led by Jude Bellingham and then led by Arda Güler, who topped off his 2-goal night by getting a red card after the game had finished. So a little bit of histrionics from Real Madrid at the full-time whistle. But mostly, Dean, just an absolutely incredible game of football. And it does feel like I've got the best of them this week. The Atleti Barcelona game yesterday, and now this Barnstormer in what a lot of people were calling the European Classico. I remember listening to a couple of podcasts last week from a variety of different places and hearing people talk about these two teams from a Bayern perspective, from a Real Madrid perspective. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me was like the Real Madrid perspective of it being like Bayern are perhaps like the only team we really respect. I was like, what? Like, sort of looking at it from a slightly different angle. They were like, yeah, we see a lot of ourselves in Bayern Munich. And I think that feeling, from what I listened to from a Bayern perspective is a little bit mutual, although I think that there's a bit more of a chip on the Bayern shoulder because they've struggled against Real Madrid in European competition for so many years. You have to go back to 2012 for the last time they beat them over 2 legs. And you have to go back a lot further back than that. It was 2001 for the last time that they won at the Bernabeu. So it's not been ideal from that perspective, but there is a level of respect. These are the two teams that have met the most in the Champions League / European Cup down the years, which says something about both of their pedigree. And I think that, although the first leg was 2-1 to Bayern at the Bernabeu, Dean, it felt really like they should have put the game to bed. It felt like they had the opportunities, they had the control. And yes, there were moments for Bayern Munich and for Real Madrid. And yes, Manuel Neuer had a good game. But I think that, on the balance of it, it felt like Bayern should perhaps be more than one goal ahead. And then when that goal advantage is wiped out after 35 seconds, all of the build up to this, having watched Real Madrid play against Girona at the weekend, having seen Bayern's 6-change Bayern whack St. Pauli 5-0, there was no part of me that really genuinely believed that we were going to see the Real Madrid come back today, that they would be able to overhaul this Bayern side who, for my money, are probably the best team in Europe right now. You're looking at them and thinking, like, what would possibly happen here that could turn this into a different game than what I'm expecting? And yet, it's Real Madrid in the ascendancy. It's Real Madrid who take the lead. It's Real Madrid who retake the lead. It's Real Madrid who retake the lead again. And it was a very different flavour, I think, in terms of a game of what we've seen from Real Madrid of late. It felt like they kind of played with the shackles off. It felt like they were able to utilise some smart tactical manoeuvres to get in behind Bayern and actually take advantage of some of the gaps that they left in behind. And you kind of end up wondering why this isn't a Real Madrid that we see more often in La Liga. Now, look, there are caveats to that. There are circumstances. And I think that very few teams would leave the gaps in behind that Real Madrid were able to exploit with their front line today from what Bayern left them to feast on in some ways. But equally, the intensity, the drive, we saw kind of none of that at the weekend against Girona. And suddenly it came to the Champions League and we were in one of these games, you're thinking, Real Madrid, like, surely not again. Now, ultimately, that doesn't happen. And I think over the course of 180 minutes, the better side has progressed here. Bayern were good for long spells of this game. The first half was a little bit too chaotic, I think, for anybody's liking, including Vincent Kompany. But actually, the way that they've dealt with the situation, the fact that they've dealt with a Real Madrid comeback in Europe, the feeling of inevitability that comes with that, they've kind of taken it in their stride. I think only goes to kind of strengthen the Bayern legend as well this season. They've already broken the Bundesliga goal-scoring record with that 5 games to go, which is nuts. But also on top of that, you're looking at it and thinking, okay, they've just withstood one of the kind of narrative-driven processes that the Champions League throws up on so many different occasions. That's a real test that they've overcome at this point, especially given it's Real Madrid, who they haven't had the best record against in European competition for many, many years.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Real Madrid, you can already see the narrative coming out as we go heading into this recording. They're all talking about the red card, talking about the referee. It's going to be deflection tactics. It's going to be a blame game from Real Madrid. But Bayern never managed to miss an opportunity when it arises. And obviously they've taken full benefits really of what's happened in the late stages of that game, and they haven't let it pass them by. Obviously, they've had to show some real fight themselves, Bayern, to prove that they deserve to stay in this competition. I actually think that that's really important that they were put to the test like this, because this is as tough as a final's ever going to be, to be honest. You're not really going to come up against a team with this much pedigree and match-winning ability at any stage. So when you're in a knockout...
Next.
Yeah, but I don't think the actual test of falling behind this many times is going to be any worse against PSG than it would be against Real Madrid. Like, they are the experts at coming into this sort of game, Real Madrid, and going on to win it. And when you find yourselves 1-0 down, 2-1 down, 3-2 down, and you're constantly having to get back up again, you get punched and getting back up and getting back up, and you still find the way to keep going, you still find ways to score great goal. Obviously, the Olise goal that rounds it all off is magnificent. And that moment alone, I know that Madrid are down to 10 men by then and all of that stuff, but that moment alone is just, we're going to do it. That's the sort of moment where you're like, oh, we're going to do it. You feel like you've been in the washing machine, you know, you've been spinning around. You came into the game trying to keep it tight. Your goalkeeper gives one away within the first minute. He then lets in a free kick, which I don't think is Neuer's. It's not completely Neuer's fault, but obviously because he's so good, we kind of do expect him to save free kicks like that.
The only thing I would say about it, and actually Joe Hart was on the punditry at half time here in the UK, and he was like, if you're behind the line and you're basically diving at the post, if the ball is close enough to the post, your body like physically won't let you dive at full stretch towards the post because you'll knock yourself out.
Joe Hart would have.
Well, yeah, Joe Hart might have. He would have just knocked himself out. Exactly. It was like your body actually restrains you from like committing to that in the same kind of way. If you're a yard further forward, and look, maybe he doesn't get to it, the loop on the ball, etc., and you can understand him trying to find it at the best angle. I'm not criticizing it. And look, I'm not a goalkeeper, and I'm about 5'7", so the chances are that I was never getting anywhere near anything in a five-a-side goal. Never mind this, but you take the point that, like, if you are diving at full stretch, your body is always going to be like, oh, I'm going to hit a massive pole there. Ideally, I wouldn't, run into that. And I'm not talking about Robert Lewandowski. But when you kind of look at it in terms of, where his starting position is, it feels very odd. Like when you're watching it, it doesn't look right. And that I think is, and look, again, I don't want to take away from the free kick because it is a beautiful strike from Arda Güler. But I just don't understand. If he makes the same dive, a yard forward and he doesn't get there, I don't think anybody is talking about it. But it just felt weird and it looks weird. And I think that's a strange place to be for someone of Manu Neuer's caliber.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously, he's going to have the microscope on him. It was the same in the US coverage. Peter Schmeichel refused to blame Neuer for the second goal. He 100% blamed him for the first one. It's in the second one, like, the goalkeeper's not at fault for that goal. But nevertheless, Bayern, as I say, have had to go through the ringer to come out the other side. And that's done them a world of good now. Now that they've come through it, I think they're not just favourites. They are clear favourites for me now. And I know that we've just watched PSG do what they did yesterday, and I know that PSG are a very good side. But I think that Bayern have proven that they've got absolutely everything in their armoury now, because this is the sort of thing I might have had some doubts about going behind this many times. But to have come through that as well, I'm more and more convinced by the minute.
Maybe. Like, I think if they give PSG that amount of space that they did to Real Madrid today, they will struggle to contain it, because I think there is a little bit more clinicality and fizz about that PSG attack. It's something that you and I spoke about yesterday. But anyway, we'll come on to the semi-finals as and when they come round, or maybe at the end of this podcast. I wanted to just kind of talk about a couple of things, because there were, I think, some interesting tactical maneuvers that went on in this game. I'll start with Bayern because they obviously are the side that's going to progress. But it felt like in the first half, Bayern almost overcommitted to the idea of killing this game off. And actually, I thought that Connie Lima, who's had a phenomenal season, had a really difficult game on both sides of the defence. He played, at times on the left and then on times on the right. And I thought he struggled with both. He spent a lot of time inverting into midfield. Bayern spent a lot of time allowing themselves to go 2-on-2 at the back. Now, they implemented a similar strategy at the Bernabeu, but I thought that Upamecano had one of those kind of perfect games at the Bernabeu in some ways, in that every time he made the right decision, every time he shifted, whether it was Vinicius, it was usually Vinicius, or Mbappe, he pushed them into areas where they struggled to actually cause all that much danger. That wasn't necessarily the case, I didn't think, today. And with Upamecano and Jonathan Tah, who struggled with killing Mbappe, I thought all night, it felt like that 2-on-2, which had been so effective in the first game in allowing Bayern to take control and use their technicality to effectively control like the first 70 odd minutes. It felt like it left them a little bit exposed today. And it felt like Real Madrid learned their lessons in some ways from the first game. I'll come on to that and that element of it. The thing that I think Bayern did very, very well is that when they came out for the second half, with the game level on aggregate, they effectively, there's a phrase in German that they use, which is take the air out of the ball. And I think that what they did here was they just slowed this down massively. They were like, whoa, too chaotic, and we were allowing too much space. And it didn't mean that there wasn't chances in the second half, but they had to be more curated. I think, from a Real Madrid perspective. There's a lovely ball across from Trent Alexander-Arnold, which Kylian Mbappe volleys, and it is saved by Manu Neuer. There's a moment for Vinicius Jr. where he effectively airballs one, where it felt like it would be easier to strike the ball, maybe not score, but to strike the ball and have a good chance. It wasn't like the opportunities suddenly completely dried up. It just felt like they had to be worked far harder to gain. And I think that from a Bayern perspective, when they knew where they were going to dominate the ball in the second half and they know the quality that they have in these areas, that probing and patient possession really felt like it swung the game back in their favour after probably favouring Real Madrid for the first 45 minutes. And actually, part of that was they frustrated Real Madrid with the way that they were just able to knock the ball around, to slow it down, to that very, very patient wait for penetration. And it almost felt like in doing so, they got into Real Madrid's heads a little bit. And look, we can talk about this Camavinga bit here, because I think that he came on and actually did a really good job. And in my notes from the game, I'd written down Camavinga for Brahim Diaz has really added something to this Real Madrid midfield. It's allowed them to gain back a little bit the control that Bayern had in the opening 15, 20 minutes of the second half. So much so that it wasn't just all one-way traffic. And I thought he got around the pitch really well. He covered really well. He gets the first yellow card, which is, look, I think both of them are yellow cards. I don't really have any issues with either the decision. The first yellow card is for a challenge. Fine, no bother. That can happen in a game like this. The second one, he fouls Harry Kane. I don't think he's going to get booked for the foul, but he walks away with the ball and stops a quick free kick being taken. Is insanity. And the frustration, I think, with Camavinga, and obviously he was tried in the number 6 role in that Girona game, and obviously didn't give a good enough account of himself that Arbeloa thought he was going to be trusted today to anchor this midfield. But I did think he'd added something. I thought that actually what he'd brought to the team and the way that they shifted shape when he came on to effectively give themselves a few more bodies in the middle of the park to try and blunt Bayern in that area had really helped Real Madrid to establish themselves. He'd made some really important blocks in the defensive third, and then he gets sent off for that. And every time it feels like Camavinga is about to come to the boil, he does something silly. And it really frustrates me because I really like him as a player. I think he has a little bit of everything. I think he has so many tools in his locker. And I think that, there is a world-class player in there waiting to come out. And then he does things like this. And you'll remember he got sent off in the quarterfinal last year in the Arsenal game as well. There's just something holding it back. But I do think that frustration and the fact that there were silly decisions being made by Real Madrid in moments like this was also caused by the fact that Bayern were able to then slow it down. And then as soon as Real Madrid are down to 10, they go through the gears. Yes, Luis Diaz's strike takes a deflection, but he'd been threatening to do something like that all game long, right? And not with loads of effect, I will say, but he'd been darting in off that left-hand side, trying to open up shooting chances for himself. And finally, in that space where Camavinga would have been, he opens up that little bit of a gap. He fires it and it takes a nick off Militao and flies past Lunin. And, the game is pretty much done by that point. With 10 men, Real Madrid have to throw everything at it. And the final goal, the goal that wins it on the night for Bayern and seals the deal, last kick of the game, Michael Olise, who gets his reward for 2 really impressive 90 minutes. Now, I thought he had to work a whole lot harder here than he did in the first leg. And we spoke last week about the fact that Alvaro Carreras had a terrible time trying to contain him. And Olise kind of had the fun of the fair, the Bernabeu. Ferland Mendy come in at left back here. And I thought that he did a much better job defending one-on-one. He didn't go marauding forwards up the pitch. He concentrated on that defensive duty. And Olise found it much harder to open up the spaces. But as the game wore on, you saw him start to kind of grind into life and find those opportunities. There's a couple that he whips over the bar coming in off that right-hand side, and he finally gets the goal that he deserved over these 2 legs, because he has been absolutely brilliant all season. But I thought that in particular, the way that he teased and toyed with Real Madrid in the first leg deserved reward within itself. So for him to score the goal that ended up winning the game on the night, pretty special. And for it to be the last kick of the game, there's something quite beautiful about that. It's like a walk-off home run, right? Like you see that and you're like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. You score and the referee just blows it up. He's like, yeah, that'll do.
Literally the last kick of the game, and, cements his status. I mean, you've obviously spoken about Olise as a potential Ballon d'Or winner. I think him and Harry Kane will be right up there now. That's the sort of big game win. As I say, it kind of did have the feel of a final, right? The way that it's played out, what it's taken to win it, like that is going to go a long way when it comes to picking a Ballon d'Or winner, and it will certainly be taken into account. And Olise's rise is just phenomenal. He's obviously 24 now. Since I saw him play at Reading, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Going and making that move to
that long ago, does it?
pretty sure, we would have been at Bleacher Report. It would have been at Bleacher Report, and Michael Olise was making his name in senior football at Reading, and then got his move to Crystal Palace. It would have been about 2021, and then as a few seasons there, and now he's making his name at Bayern Munich very quickly. And he's just settled so brilliantly. He's clearly got a very disciplined mind, and France are grateful for him. But I just wish he'd have chosen to play for England, Jack. I just wish he was playing for England this summer. But nah.
He wants to win something, mate.
Yeah, true, exactly.
That's why he went to Bayern. That's why he picked France.
Picked Bayern and France. He's done all right, isn't he? He could have ended up at England and Man United or something.
Yeah. I mean, just like we can wax lyrical about Bayern and Michael Olise all night long, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of time to do so when we start talking about these Ballon d'Or conversations later in the year. But I do think that just a word on Real Madrid, because it was always going to be interesting how they set up today, right? Because when we spoke last week about this first leg, one of the kind of things I took from it was Real Madrid were not capable of kind of playing the technical game with Bayern. They were going to be outsmarted in those areas of the pitch. And I'd been, questioning how they were going to fit all of the big pieces of the puzzle in together. How do you get Vinny Jr. and Kylian Mbappe and Jude Bellingham all onto the pitch at the same time? Well, we saw it today. And actually, after what happened in the last 25 minutes of the first leg, I was kind of expecting Real Madrid to do this, and I was expecting it to work to a degree, because I think what they had to play on today was the kind of chaos element of it. And when I spoke about Bayern taking the air out of the ball in the second half, it's because actually the game state that they'd gone for and tried to go for the jugular had kind of suited Real Madrid. And those lessons learned that I spoke about, pinging the ball into the channels, allowing those kind of first-time passes in there, Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. darting around like whippets up front, making sure they were on the end of those things. Bellingham, I thought, played very, very well in the center of the park and did a good job in kind of managing the physicality of it. Joshua Kimmich didn't have his best game. I think that was partly due to the fact that Valverde and Bellingham in the first half, were there and thereabouts and making things happen on a regular basis, up and down the pitch. Obviously, Arda Güler scores 2 phenomenal goals, but he starts on one side with Brahim Diaz on the other, and Vinny Jr. kind of holds down the left flank, which allows Güler to drift into the midfield 3. And Brahim kind of holds the width on the right-hand side. So the 4-4-2 is quite lopsided in some ways. But actually, this felt like the methodology that they needed for this game. Again, I'm not 100% sure that this will translate to La Liga, to teams who are going to play more cautiously against Real Madrid, because those spaces in behind won't work to the same degree. And I think you need more control. But actually, this was a game where they were kind of willing to give that up, especially in the first half, and it worked for them. A little bit of Madridista magic, obviously, from Arda Güler. They take advantage of an error. They score a wonderful free kick. The third goal is a lovely bit of play between Vinny and Kylian Mbappe, which he ends up slotting home. But actually, they went for the jugular. And when I spoke to Graham Hunter about this on the radio earlier, he was like, yeah, you could do that, but you might get torn apart. And that was a risk that they were obviously going to take. Now, I think that having Mendy back at left back helped in that regard, because he's not pouring forwards to try and join the attack and make things happen. And it meant that they were a little bit more covered when Bayern came back at them the other way. But equally, I do think the Real Madrid played this correctly, and they're undone a little bit by 1, their own stupidity with the red cards, 2, a slightly lucky deflection of Luis Diaz, and 3, just they get beaten by a Bayern side who I think generally just across the board are a better team than Real Madrid right now. And when you kind of look at it, I think they probably did as well as they could in the scenario, and they'll look at this game as a frustration because a couple of things falling their way in different ways, and maybe it looks a little bit different.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, look, which way would your money have gone if Camavinga hadn't have got that red, if things were looking like they were heading into extra time?
Or Bayern, but at half time, I wasn't sure.
Okay.
But at half time, it was like, this could really go anywhere. I have absolutely no idea how this shakes out because it feels too risky. By the time it got to sort of 75 minutes, I was pretty confident that Bayern were going to find the moment because they were probing and they were finding gaps and the shots were starting to come in. A couple of good saves from Lunin, a couple of ones that kind of sneak narrowly wide, a couple of ones that go just over the bar. It felt like Bayern had found the control again in the game. But at half-time, I had no idea.
Well, sounds like you definitely got a good game then, because I pretty much knew what was going to happen in my game for the entire 90 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let's take a little break. Then we come back on the other side. We're going to talk about all of the action and drama in Arsenal 0, Sporting 0. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. Jack Collins and Dean Jones with you, looking at the last of these quarter-final second legs. And we go to the Emirates. There was a lot on the line here, Dean, and there was a lot of conversation. There's a lot of noise around Arsenal. I thought this was going to be an interesting game. And although the scoreline obviously reflects a 0-0 and you want goals and you want moments and all of these things that make the Champions League special, I didn't think it was as dull an encounter as it might look on paper. And it played out almost exactly as the first leg did, with Sporting looking to break and finding those moments in transition, Arsenal having the lion's share of the ball, but not loads of attacking threat. Equally, Arsenal didn't have to go for the jugular here because they knew if they kept a clean sheet, they were going through to the Champions League semi-finals. And ultimately, that's what they've done. What did you make of it?
Well, I wanted fire, pure fire, Jack. That's what I was looking for. And didn't get it. I mean, at half time, like I say, you really didn't know what you were getting. I knew I was getting a 0-0. And that's, I think, what Arteta wanted at that point. Look, Arsenal came into this game under pressure to play more attractive football. I think that this is a fine balance that Arteta's got to deal with. His team naturally defend and play it safe, but obviously when things don't go their way, it then comes back around and people say, well, why didn't you try to score goals? And so I think early on in this game, they did play on the front foot and there was a good atmosphere around the place. You know, there was this big banner saying history in our sights. And I was like, well, what's the history? Is it that you're going to do the double here? Or is it that you're going to become the first team to look like they're going to win 4 trophies but win none? What are we celebrating here?
Last year.
Yeah. So look, they seemed to put all the doubts aside at the start of this game. The fans, the players, everything looked good. But that faded as the game wore on. And they played within themselves. They played with a nervousness again. And while I wanted to see those long periods of intensity come back that we'd seen early on in the game, it didn't. I mean, ultimately, we've got to the end of the game. I'll check the stat on this, but I'm pretty sure, 50% ball possession, 1 shot on target each. Like, fire. Pure fire.
Both hit the woodwork, so they don't count.
As what?
Both hit the woodwork though, so that's not off target for each.
They both hit the woodwork. That is right. Look, ultimately, it's a very small margin. I mean, Sporting had a shot in the final seconds of the game that whisked just wide of the post, and
would have been such a moment for Joao Simoes as well. Like the youngster, come on at this point, started the first leg in the place of the captain, came on. If he'd scored, that would have been a hell of a story.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have been undeserved either because there was so little between these teams. But Arsenal have squeaked through into the semi-finals, and they've done so. Again, like I said in the first leg, I can't criticise too much because the game plan has ultimately worked to keep it tight, and they've come through 2 games against Sporting without conceding a goal. And Sporting are a team that score a lot of goals, so they've done very well in that sense to contain them. The manner of it, though, meant that there was a very strange feeling around the place at full time. The camera cut to Declan Rice right on full time. And obviously, I don't know if he was feeling sick. I don't know if he was feeling like, wow, we got away with one. Well, I don't know if he's feeling relief. I don't know. But he was completely deadpan. He looked kind of sad in a way. It was a very strange look on the face of Declan Rice. And they cut to Arteta and he looks very relieved. And there was a chorus of North London Forever that went around the stadium, and it was, sung with the scarves up and everything. And obviously everybody's very happy to be through to the semi-finals. But it's more like, phew, it was no wild celebrations on the pitch or in the stands, despite the fact that they are into a Champions League semi-final. And I think that's a reflection of where this team is at, because they're neither here nor there. Like, they are at the stage where they're top of the Premier League. They are at the stage where they're into the final four of the Champions League. But I'm not sure they believe they can stay in either competition on top. I just don't get that sense from them at all. And that's the biggest worry about this now, because you're on to Atletico Madrid. They have no problem in mindset. You're on to the weekend's game against Man City. I don't think they're going to have any problem in mindset. And the problem that I've kind of got now with Arsenal going into both of those games, particularly the one at the weekend, is what are they playing for? Are they playing to win, or are they playing to not lose? And I think if
they were to keep a clean sheet at the weekend, surely that effectively secures the title. Like, draw or
it
win.
Absolutely does. And this is why they're in such a difficult position. Because this has worked, I fully expect Arteta to make that a boring game. But Man City, they are on fire, pure fire. And I find it very hard to believe at the moment that Man City won't score against this Arsenal team. Arsenal are vulnerable at fullback. They can't find a solution at the moment to what is going on in the fullback positions. They changed things up for this game, and ultimately it'll look like it's worked out. But Mosquera's played right back and Capier's played left back. It's just not convincing. There was one moment right at the end of the first half, Araujo chips one from the far left of the pitch to the far right post, and Katama come across it, and he's kind of sliced across goal, and it's come off the post. I was like, this is exactly the problem. They've got in behind one fullback and the other fullback's not on his man. And like, this is an issue. And like, obviously people have talked, particularly on the Patreon, we've had a lot of Arsenal fans bringing up the fact that they miss Jurriën Timber so much. And like, it's true.
No, he's been the best right back in the Premier League this season.
Yeah, 100%. It's true. So I feel very strange about where I think Arsenal sit right now. And I don't even know what they should do for these next games, because they're not going to take the game to Man City, are they? They're not going to do that. But equally, it's a dangerous game to sit there and have one shot on target across 90 minutes, because City ultimately, as they get deeper into their game, are going to come more and more at them. And the same is going to happen against Atleti, particularly over two legs. Like, Arsenal were on the verge of a historic season. These players are on the verge of having their name written into the fabric of the football club, right? Whatever people are saying about Arteta now, whatever doubts they're happening, he goes into the archives as well as a legend, right? They're this close. Like, they're one big win away in both competitions to making it, right? They're almost in the Champions League final. And if they beat Man City, they are going to be Premier League champions. And yet that belief's still not there. And when I look back at this game, I think Sporting will be coming away from it thinking, we could have done that. We could have done that. We had enough chances. Like, there's a moment, Saliba gave the ball away in the first half, and Hjulmand wins it back, and Trincao will feel that he should have scored. Suarez flashed one wide at the far post.
Raya gave one away that wasn't capitalised on as well, just outside the area.
Yeah.
Like, I think what it is Arsenal felt like they did what they needed to do and no more. And look, maybe that is with, the weekend in mind. There's not loads of rotation options available. We've talked about the depth of this squad all season long, but at the kind of crunch moment, it feels like the key rotation pieces are missing or deeply, deeply out of form. Yeah. It just feels like, maybe it was just a case of conserving some energy. And I don't know if you can go into this final part of the season while thinking about conserving energy. I think you need to be all hands to the pump. And that doesn't feel like it's the case with Arsenal right now. The other thing I think with it is interesting is that we've talked quite a lot this season about the way that Arsenal are perceived by the general public and by non-Arsenal supporters, and whether that rings true. And I think, I've been reading, a number of different things, number of Arsenal blogs, number of general blogs, all these different things about it to try and get a gauge of the situation. And one of the things that struck me from Red Story by Tom Curran was him talking about the fact that the more Arsenal go into their own shell, the more the things that they're accused of, relying on set pieces, et cetera, become true. He's like, actually, in the periods where we were being accused of this the most, it was actually an Arsenal side who played with genuine attacking fire, won a lot of set pieces. It just happened that the killer blow tended to come from those set pieces, but it wasn't necessarily the case that actually they were over-reliant on them. It was the fact that that's where the blows tended to come from, despite the fact that they put together good performances. But one of the kind of flip sides of this period, where the energy feels like it's gone out of the room, where Arsenal don't feel like they have the same kind of spark, or maybe that's fatigue. Look, there's lots of different reasons we can talk about this. The more that they kind of go within their shell, the more that the tropes that were perhaps, maybe not unfairly, that's maybe too strong a word, but were overblown in the first half of the season, are now potentially not overblown because of the way that Arsenal are playing. And he was like, it's a real frustration because I can't even argue the point anymore. That's not what's going on, because it does feel like that's what's going on now. And we've got to this point in the season. It's like, all of the things that are being said, all of the discussion points that are being had are almost being forced in by the fact that this team has lost its confidence and ability to play. And they're just trying to grind through these games and get the results they need, rather than going out to blow teams away and win. And it does feel like Arsenal have got to a point where it's just a question of, can they grind through like 4-1-0 to the Arsenals and get this over the line? Yeah.
It's interesting, actually. A quote's just come through from Arteta talking about Declan Rice. I say he looked like he was sick at the end, and so he genuinely was. He says Declan looked absolutely shattered before. He looked like he had no chance to play today. Wasn't even feeling good today, but he's played 94 minutes. And I mean, fair play to him, because he genuinely, like I say, he looked sick. And I was like, I couldn't tell whether he genuinely was ill or whether it was like Arsenal's performance had done that to him. Maybe it was a bit of both. But
if he's out for the weekend because he played this game, that could be one of the key defining moments.
I mean, it's only, it's sickness rather than an injury. If he's managed to get through that, then, you'd count on Declan Rice, now just recover. Like, you wrap him up now, put him in his duvet, his Arsenal duvet, and just leave him there and get him up to the stadium and just stick him in a hotel and let him wait. But, what concerns me for Arsenal isn't even, people have talked about the midfield combinations. Rice played alongside Zubimendi tonight. It's not that bothers me right now. What I'm thinking for these big two ties that they've got coming up, one against Atleti, one against Man City, is firepower. And Arsenal don't have any, mate. Arsenal's top four are duds at the moment, and I don't know where it's all gone. Right?
I thought Eze did okay, especially
Eze did okay, but that's not good enough, mate. We're at the business end of the season. Being okay is nothing compared to what you're going to be coming up against. And Saka wasn't able to play in this game, so he's got an Achilles injury that's been niggling at him since the Carabao Cup finals. He wasn't available. Madueke plays. Madueke goes out of this game after about 62 minutes. He's injured. So Max Dowman comes on. So I'm assuming Saka's going to be okay for the weekend, but clearly now we know he's not at his best for that. So we're not going to see prime Saka. Like, whoever plays on the other flank, we're not seeing really anything down there from Trossard or Martinelli in terms of like genuine title winning stuff or trophy winning stuff. Gyökeres is okay. Eze's okay. You're going into ties against, say, like Man City, who are looking so good on the break, like whether it's Semenyo or Doku or Shirky. I know Haaland hasn't been scoring, and it's like almost historic non-scoring from
playing two defenders at once, which
but
is
he's actually being quite effective, like in his own way still, right?
The good news for Arsenal is that Nico O'Reilly looks like he might be injured, and he's City's main goal threat at the moment.
Yeah, but then even with Atleti, you compare what they've got in attack, and you look, say it's Lookman or Alvarez or Griezmann or Simeone or even Llorente, whatever, right? They've got that thrust and like that. They can kill you, and I don't feel like Arsenal can kill you. And I think that's would be my biggest fear as an Arsenal fan right now. How are we going to kill these games? Is it a corner? Does it have to be a corner? Because I don't see that compared to all the best teams, and you could bring PSG into the equation, Bayern into the equation, all of those teams have better attacks than Arsenal right now, which is very strange when you're top of the Premier League and into the Final Four of the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. But equally, as we say, on the verge of history. I mean, history makers tonight. First Arsenal side that have gone to back-to-back.
Yeah, it's strange to talk about them so negatively, isn't it? I mean, this is like what Arteta's actually done during his time at Arsenal is actually pretty phenomenal, right? Like to go from, they were struggling to even qualify for the Champions League. He was on the brink of the sack twice. They didn't know how to build a team and all this sort of stuff. And they've built a team and they've got everything together. And now because everyone's doubting them, they've started to doubt themselves. And it seems like it's self-fulfilling at the moment. And I just want to see them believe in their own words. Like what Arteta says leading into kickoff, he's great at it. He's a great hype man. But I'm just not seeing it. And so in one of these games, I'll accept them going to Man City and shutting up shop and getting a point out of that one. That's not the end. That's not the worst plan in the world. And if you can pull it off, then fine.
The first leg of the Atleti game is at the Metropolitano, so you'd imagine it would be a similar game.
So they're going to try and do it again, right? And we'll see, mate. We'll see. But there's still work to do. If you're Arsenal fans, try and be more optimistic than I am.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's plenty of reason to be optimistic, right? Like they've done the job, no more than the job, but the job was there to get into the Champions League semi-final, to not get dragged to extra time, so that you're not, ending up in a fight with City after playing 120 minutes on Wednesday night. Like they've achieved the objectives that they set out to achieve today, but I think not in the manner that they might have hoped to achieve those objectives. And that's maybe the rub of it. But equally, back-to-back Champions League semi-finals, everything in their hands. If you'd offered Arsenal fans this at the start of the season, 6 points clear, although City have a game in hand and you have to go to the Etihad, and also you're in a Champions League semi-final against Atletico Madrid, I would have bitten your hand off for it, right? In terms of where they've got to, it's just a flip side of what that looks like and how they kind of move forward from here and how there's a little bit of that fire and spark back to take them over these final hurdles that stand between them and a historical campaign. And right now, I think that there's just a real tension in this group. And I think that it's fine to have that. They're on the verge, as we say, of history. It's fair enough that this is kind of like, whoa, look at what's in front of us here. But equally, you have to go and do it to make history. You don't get there by just looking at it and being overawed by it. And right now, it feels like maybe there's an element of being overawed with the situation, plus the injuries, etc. There's more on Arsenal coming on Friday's Truth. Sam and Doogie are looking at this attack and why it's been a little bit stunted of late. So worth digging into that on Friday morning, where there's a long discussion about all of these different bits and bobs. But they're into the semi-finals. We have our final four in the Champions League. Arsenal against Atletico Madrid and last year's champions PSG against potentially the best team in Europe right now in Bayern Munich. Both very, very interesting in very, very different ways. And on that note, we're going to call this a day. So all that's left for me to do is say a massive thank you to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I'm Jack Collins. This has been Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. Thank you so much for listening as ever. And we'll see you all very, very shortly, Rank Squad. Take it easy. Peace.